Everyone knows that the January transfer window is for clubs in crisis, which is why we rarely talk about Manchester City at this time of year. In fact, apart from the signing of Aymeric Laporte in 2018, City have not made a big money signing in January at any point in Pep Guardiola's tenure. But City are a club in crisis now, which means that this January they're going to spend big, with The Athletic reporting that they intend to strengthen in defence at number 6/number 8, and up front. All of which makes City the perfect focus for sensible transfers. Yes, this is sensible transfers where we look for weaknesses in squads and identify solutions to those problems. Remember, this is not what we think the clubs will do, it's what we, as football analysts, think they should do. Now we're going to come to the question of Kyle Walker later, but let's begin by acknowledging the elephant in the room. And in this case, the elephant is Spanish, 6'3", and the current holder of the Ballon d'Or. It's Rodri. Of course, it's no coincidence that City's worst run of form in the Guardiola era has coincided with Rodri being injured. Now, this is partly down to Rodri being one of the best holding midfielders in the world, but it's also partly down to the fact that they don't really have a viable backup to him either. So bringing someone in who can deputise for Rodri is going to be important for City to reverse their current slump in form, but it'll also improve their depth for the future. Before we get to the options though, let's quickly remind ourselves what a number 6 is expected to do in Guardiola's system. Pep Guardiola wants his teams to possess the ball. He wants them to progress the ball cleanly down the field, forcing the opponents deep into their own half, ending up with a position that looks something like this. Now from here, what he wants them to do is to maintain possession and then to gradually break down the low block that they've created. Now, the number 6 is at the heart of this. Not only do they have to help their team move the ball down the field, but they also have to orchestrate possession around the opposition's box, helping to pull the opponent's structure apart. In possession then, City's number 6 needs to be technically secure, but also tactically savvy, able to read the game just as much as being able to participate in it. But City's possession game is risky. Although they're going to have the majority of possession, when they do lose the ball, the opposition now has a huge amount of space to attack. Guardiola has planned for this though, and there are 2 phases to prevent these turnovers from becoming a problem. The first one is counter-pressing, where the players around the ball fall onto it to stop the counter-attack at source. Now, if this doesn't happen, then City have to be ready to defend those big spaces, which is something they've been struggling to do without Rodri, especially when the game is in transition. There is an added complication here. What happens when Rodri is fit again? Do you just drop the new player to the bench? In which case, how do you persuade that player to sign when they know they're eventually going to be dropped and play backup to one of the best players in the world in that position? Another option would be to look for a starting level player who can fill in for Rodri at 6, but then who can be moved into one of the 8 slots as soon as he returns. This way you can pay the big fee you'd expect for a January signing while still achieving some longer term value. So these are the 3 requirements for our profile. Our target needs to be able to play as a number 6 both in and out of possession, and it would be perfect if they can be shifted higher up the pitch when Rodri is back. So what are the options? The gold standard here is Bruno Guimaraes. He fits all 3 of our criteria, having played as a 6 and an 8 at Newcastle since arriving from Lyon. However, he would be very expensive, and at 27 years old, he's probably towards the upper age limit that City would be happy to pay for, especially given the current age profile of their squad. But beyond Guimaraes, all of the other options are going to be lacking in one of our 3 requirements. Players like Angelo Stiller at Stuttgart or Real Sociedad's Martin Zubimendi are more than good enough at the in-possession aspects of the 6 role, but they could struggle covering large spaces defensively, and they also wouldn't port over to the 8 role that well. At the other end of the spectrum, there's some players who would be a better fit at the outer possession requirements for the role. In the last few seasons, Atalanta's Edison has been repurposed as a 6 by his manager, but although his in-possession play has improved, he's probably still below the level City would be looking for in that area. And if you want a couple of younger options who fit this kind of profile, you could go for Monaco's Lamine Camara or Sporting's Dario Asugo, who's on loan in Spain right now. My pick though is Carlos Baleba. Although Baleba has largely been playing in a double pivot at Brighton, he has shown some signs that he could play as a 6 for Guardiola. In spite of the fact that he arrived at Brighton as a more defensive option, his improvements on the ball, this season in particular, suggest he would be able to take on the in-possession requirements for the 6 role well enough to cover Rodri's absence before moving higher up the pitch once he returns. Now we know that Brighton would hold out for a big fee, but the idea here is that he would become a starting 11 player in due course. And it's worth saying that in the last couple of seasons, City have been a little bit behind the curve when it comes to taking a risk on younger players. I'm thinking of players like Delap, Cole Palmer, Romeo Lavia, so perhaps it's time for City to accept the risk, get ahead of the curve and pay Brighton the fee. One of the other areas highlighted in The Athletic where City will be looking to improve this January is the defensive line. Not only have they struggled with injuries, particularly in the centre-back slots, but they've also got a number of players who have started to age out. Kyle Walker is emblematic of this, and the club will be looking to replace him in the near future. Walker has been at City for all but one of the seasons in the Guardiola era, and so his potential departure represents an interesting possibility for the City manager. Does he look for a like-for-like replacement, or could we see him bringing in a different profile to allow him to tweak his tactics? And on top of this, over the last few seasons, we've seen a bit of an evolution in how fullbacks are being used at the elite level, moving them inside the pitch during their possession phase, which allows them greater central control both in and out of possession. More recently though, coaches have been much happier abandoning the centre of the pitch, looking for advantages that exist in the wide channels. Last season, Guardiola regularly used his fullbacks in that way, but there was an issue. These fullbacks were almost all far closer to centre-back profiles than fullback ones, which raises the question, could we see City sign a more traditional fullback profile to replace Walker? But there's a problem here too. Because of the tendency for elite clubs to use fullbacks inside, there's far fewer players around who fit that more traditional outside fullback role, and many of those who do are effectively unavailable. Premier League fans will be aware of Tino Livramento at Newcastle, who fits the profile perfectly, but he's on a 2028 contract, and so his fee would be eye-watering. Another option I like is Monaco's Van der Sar, but he's also on a 2028 contract. So the reality is, even if Guardiola does fancy switching to a more traditional profile, there really aren't the options out there to justify the move right now. And so perhaps the better option as we approach January is to take a slightly different approach and look to solve two problems in one. Bring in a replacement for Kyle Walker and boost City's centre-back options. JP Van Hecke at Brighton would slot seamlessly into City's back line, but would also be comfortable operating in the wide channel, either as an outside centre-back in a back three if City are inverting their left back, or as a more conservative right back in a back four. Another potential option is Taylor Harwood-Bellis at Southampton, who came through the City Academy, so he would be suited to the playstyle. City also have a first option buyback clause on him, which would make him a realistic target. My sensible transfer though is Bafode Diakite at Lille, who is the ultimate flexibility pick. Diakite has played in every position across a back four, including a number of games at left back, which means he would offer a solution to City's current backline injury crisis. But on top of this, he's also been played in a more traditional fullback role, as well as being used as an inverted fullback by Paulo Fonseca during his stint at Lille. So Diakite would give Guardiola a Walker replacement, but with the added flexibility that he could be played in either of the two centre-back slots, while also offering a more physical option from the right in games where he doesn't want to use Rico Lewis. So those are my sensible transfer picks, and this is what Manchester City would look like after January if I was in charge. I'll be back soon with a sensible transfer video on Liverpool, but if you can't wait until then for your transfer fix, why not check out The Athletic's deal sheet, or tune in to The Athletic's Week in Football every Saturday this January. Bye!
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.